The lobby was too bright for the time of morning. The fluorescent tubes embedded in the ceiling seemed to hum with a low, unbroken insistence. A cold mechanical breath exhaled over polished tile and glass partitions. It was the kind of lighting that flattened everything it touched: faces, floors, truths, until all color surrendered to uniform paleness. Patrons moved through the space with the soft, uneasy caution of people who understood they were being watched, not by any one person in particular, but by the system itself. The cameras perched like indifferent insects in corners, the silent motion detectors, the teller windows framed like confessionals. Every footstep, every gesture, had the subdued rhythm of someone passing through a checkpoint rather than a place of service. In the center of this brightness sat Mrs. Laverne Carter. She occupied a molded plastic chair near the rope line, hands folded neatly around the soft leather of her handbag. The bag rested quietly against her lap, small, worn at the corners, its metal clasp dulled from years of being opened with deliberate, gentle fingers. She held it the way one might hold a fragile object entrusted to them long ago, carefully, protectively, as if the act of holding it was a vow. Her posture was upright, not stiff but composed. Her cane leaned against her right leg. Her shoes were polished black, low-heeled, the kind that spoke of pragmatism rather than vanity. She watched the tellers, the movement, the clock. She did not fidget. She did not hurry. Her stillness alone made her conspicuous in a room calibrated for quiet anxiety. A teller had taken the check 20 minutes prior. Just a moment, ma'am. It had been the kind of moment that stretched into discomfort. Above her, the fluorescent hum thickened. A clipboard was passed from one employee to another. A manager stepped out of an office, glanced at her, and quickly stepped back inside. Two patrons exchanged an uncertain look, the kind that lasts half a second but communicates an entire question. What's going on? Laverne breathed in slowly, then out again. A measured breath, a patient breath. The doors opened. Two uniformed police officers entered in deliberate, heavy steps, the weight of their boots punctuating the air like low, final drumbeat. They brought a cold front with them, a sudden shift in atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. Heads lifted, shoulders tensed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Their ID badges caught the fluorescent light in sharp, metallic flashes, turning each movement into a small, involuntary flare of authority. They scanned the room with trained eyes before approaching the branch manager, who greeted them with a tight, professional nod and a gesture toward Laverne. Words passed between them, too quiet to hear, but unmistakably purposeful. The officer's posture shifted. One of them, taller, jaw clenched, fingers resting lightly on his belt, walked toward her. The other followed half a pace behind. Laverne straightened in her chair before they spoke. Not out of fear, out of respect for herself. Ma'am, the taller officer said. His voice was steady, controlled, practiced. We need to speak with you for a moment. The hum of the lights pressed down. The room seemed to contract. Laverne looked up at him, eyes clear, expression calm. Yes, of course, she said. Her voice was soft but unwavering. She adjusted her grip on her handbag, a subtle reaffirmation of dignity. He glanced at the bag as though it were evidence. The bank staff reported an issue with the check you presented. We'd like you to come with us to verify some information. A murmur rippled across the lobby, quickly swallowed by silence. Laverne tilted her head slightly. Composed, measured. Is something wrong with it? The second officer exchanged a look with the first, a look that suggested impatience more than certainty. We'll discuss it in a more private area, he said. Just need you to stand up and come with us. Her hand touched the cane, fingers closing lightly around its handle. She began rising with the slow, deliberate care of someone whose body demanded patience but whose spirit refused to yield. When she stood, she did not shrink. She remained steady. She did not rush. The officers watched every motion, as though her slowness were a tactic. I'm moving as fast as I can, she said calmly. Without apology. The taller officer's nostrils flared with something restrained, annoyance, discomfort, authority confronted not by defiance but by composure. We just need you to cooperate. Ma'am, I am cooperating. Her tone did not rise. It did not waver. Behind them, a teller stepped back, as though proximity alone might entangle them in responsibility. The manager hovered behind the glass door to his office, hands tucked tightly into his pockets. The taller officer gestured toward a small side room. This way. Laverne nodded once, a dignified acknowledgement, then began walking. Her cane tapped gently on the floor, a soft, consistent rhythm beneath the buzz of fluorescent lights. Her handbag remained clasped in her other hand, held against her ribs as though it were the anchor keeping her upright. Eyes followed her. Tension followed the officers. Authority followed the hum of the system, steady, indifferent, unchallenged. As they neared the side room, the taller officer moved too quickly, reaching out as if to guide her. His hand closed around her elbow without warning. Laverne paused, not a stumble, a pause. Her voice, when she spoke, was faint but firm. I can walk on my own. The officer's grip tightened fractionally before releasing. His jaw locked. We're just trying to help you, ma'am. The fluorescent lights echoed their relentless hum. Her cane tapped once more. Her handbag remained steady against her side. The lobby watched the three figures disappear into the verification room, the officers' badges flashing, her posture composed, the cold air of institutional suspicion closing in around her. And when the door shut behind them, the room exhaled not relief, but resignation. The system had moved, and everyone knew what that meant. The verification room was small, boxed in by glass walls that promised transparency while delivering none. From the outside, it looked like a place where minor issues were sorted with polite efficiency. From the inside, it felt like a display case bright, inescapable, leaving no angle for privacy or dignity. The fluorescent hum seeped through the glass like a constant reminder that the system was always present, always watching. A narrow table sat in the center, laminated wood with a sterile shine. Two metal chairs faced it. The manager had placed a paper cup of coffee on the corner when he'd first ushered Laverne in, as though hospitality could soften the edges of suspicion. It sat untouched, cooling rapidly, the thin steam fading into nothing long before anyone noticed. Laverne lowered herself carefully into the chair, Kane resting beside her. Her handbag remained on her lap, hands still wrapped around it with the same quiet determination. She breathed slowly, a steady rhythm inhale, exhale measured, not by fear, but by resolve. The two officers entered behind her. Their reflections overlapped on the glass panels, creating ghostly duplicates that moved half a beat behind their bodies. Authority multiplied by angles. The manager lingered near the door. Smile tightened into a neutral line he had rehearsed years ago, the expression of someone who wanted to seem helpful while ensuring he bore no responsibility. The taller officer leaned forward slightly. "Ma'am, we need to verify the origin of the check you deposited." Laverne lifted her gaze, calm and unflinching. "I told the teller my nephew sent it. For my birthday." Pause. "I can show you his message." "We'll get to that," the officer replied, tone clipped. "Right now, we need to establish whether you're aware that the check appears fraudulent." "Appears?" she asked gently, or as the question settled heavily in the room. The manager shifted his weight but said nothing. His hands clasped behind his back, posture immaculate, complicity refined into professionalism. The officers exchanged a glance, brief, irritated. "We're investigating that," the shorter one said. "Your cooperation is important." "I'm cooperating," Laverne said. The words were steady, unadorned, as plain as the walls around her. She placed her cane in a more stable position and folded her hands atop her handbag again. "Tell me what you need." Her calmness did not soothe them. It agitated them subtly, invisibly, but undeniably. Authority expected submission, or at least a tremor of fear. Her stillness read to them as resistance. Her patience read as obstruction. Her dignity read as defiance. "Let's start with why your nephew would send you a check for this amount," the taller officer said. "He told me it was for..." He interrupted. "How often does he give you money?" Silence unfurled slowly, deliberately. Laverne's breath remained even. "I don't track generosity on a schedule," she replied. The officer tapped his pen on the table. A small, sharp sound that echoed louder than it should have in the tight glass enclosure. The manager's eyes flicked to the coffee cup. A droplet of condensation slid down the side, leaving a thin trail. Still untouched. Outside the room, tellers kept their heads down. Patrons moved in and out, glimpsing only the outlines of what happened behind the glass. It was all visible, yet none of it truly seen. The shorter officer opened a folder. "The routing number on this check doesn't match the issuing bank. That's why we're here." "A mistake," Laverne said. His brow tightened. "Are you saying the bank made an error?" "I'm saying mistakes happen." The longer the conversation stretched, the thicker the air became. The glass walls did not let sound escape, but they did not contain tension. It radiated outward, an invisible pressure on the rest of the lobby. The officers shifted in their chairs, growing impatient, growing certain. Laverne remained still, her breath a slow, steady rise and fall was the only thing in the room that maintained a natural rhythm. Outside, in the parking lot, 3 motorcycles idled in the winter sunlight. The Hells Angels had arrived 20 minutes earlier for a routine meeting with a financial advisor about a charity fund. An irony, lost on almost everyone. They stood near their bikes, leather vests, heavy boots, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the bank's brick exterior. Crunch, thick-shouldered and silent, leaned against his bike, reading a folded printout. Sparrow, lean, comb-eyed, watched pigeons flit across the asphalt. Rocco, restless, kept checking the time. Their presence drew the occasional wary look from passersby, but inside the bank, they were invisible, just another piece of background noise in a world accustomed to ignoring what did not fit its expectations. The angels talked quietly among themselves, unaware of the fault line forming behind the glass walls just 50 feet away. Yet the tension inside seemed to vibrate outward, subtle enough that only someone attuned to violence and injustice might sense it. Crunch lifted his head. "Something's off," he muttered. Sparrow didn't look at him. "This town's always off." Crunch's gaze stayed fixed on the entrance. Back in the verification room, the officers pressed on. "So you're saying you had no idea the check was fraudulent?" The taller one insisted. I'm saying, Laverne replied softly, that I have done nothing wrong. Silence followed, heavy, insistent, the kind of silence that forced everyone to confront what they already believed. The taller officer leaned back, chair tilting slightly. He studied her face for signs of guilt. All he found was composure, and somehow, that was worse. The manager stepped forward, clearing his throat. Perhaps we can, we've got it. The shorter officer snapped. The manager stepped back, smile returning tight apologetic to the officers, never to her. Laverne took another slow breath. Her breath was the only honest thing in the room. The officers misread it again. Ma'am, the taller officer said, we're going to need you to come with us to the station. The words settled like dust, on polished surfaces too light to be dramatic, too heavy to wipe away. Laverne closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Still calm. May I call my nephew? She asked. Not yet, the shorter officer said. Her fingers tightened on her handbag. Not in panic only, in resolve, as if the bag itself were a reminder of everything she had carried through much heavier rooms than this. The manager watched, doing nothing. His coffee grew colder. Outside, Crunch straightened from his bike. Something instinct or fate or the subtle tremor of tension pulled his attention. Fully to the bank doors. The glass walls inside held the truth in plain sight, and no one inside was truly seeing it. The moment arrived without drama, without warning, without the sort of build-up that fiction likes to pretend is necessary. It came instead in the form of a simple gesture, a small, human movement that should have meant nothing. Laverne reached into her handbag. Slowly, deliberately, with the same measured grace she had shown since the officers first approached her. She was retrieving her phone. The taller officer stood too quickly, chair scraping across the floor with an abrasive shriek that fractured the room's fragile stillness. His hand went to his belt. The glass walls caught the movement and multiplied it. One gesture refracted into 5, each one sharper, more accusing than the last. Ma'am, stop right there. Laverne froze, hand hovering inside her bag. I am just. Her voice was soft, controlled, human. The shorter officer cut her off. Take your hand out of the bag. Slowly, she complied. Slowly, so slowly, it felt like a protest, or so their instincts interpreted it. Her fingers emerged, holding nothing but air, her palms open, empty. But the fear had already rewritten their understanding of her. Stand up, the taller officer ordered. Now Laverne exhaled once, barely audible. Her breath brushed the cold surface of the table. She reached for her cane. The shorter officer moved first. No sudden movements. My cane, she said quietly. But the rhythm of the room had already broken. The officers were no longer listening through reason. They were listening through fear shaped by bias. Tension shaped by assumption. Her fingers closed around the cane's handle. The taller officer grabbed her wrist. It happened faster than the fluorescent hum could fill the silence. Ma'am, you're resisting? I'm not resisting. Her cane slipped from her hand. It fell in a long, slow arc, striking the tile with a heavy wooden crack that echoed unnaturally loud in the glass-wrapped room. The sound rippled out into the lobby, a single note of violence in a place built for orderly transactions. Patrons looked up. The manager stiffened. The security feed on the wall blinked red, its recording light pulsing like a heartbeat, and Laverne, pulled abruptly from her chair, stumbled not because she fought, but because a 72-year-old body does not move well when forced into someone else's urgency. Barker handbag slid from her lap. Her breath caught in her throat. Hands behind your back. The taller officer barked. I haven't done anything, she said quietly. The shorter officer twisted her arms. Not enough to injure, but enough that the message traveled through her. Bones. Submission. Obedience. Silence. Her eyes closed. Not in fear, but in preservation, as though she were making a space inside herself untouched by their hands. The cane rolled slightly. Settling several inches away, it lay still on the tile, a quiet casualty, a symbol of something stripped from her, discarded in the pursuit of order. The manager stepped forward, voice shallow. Officers, perhaps we can, we've got it. The taller one snapped. His words were nearly identical to the dismissal he'd given earlier, but this time, they carried the weight of violence. The manager's mouth closed. His coffee sat untouched on the table behind him. Through the glass walls, the patrons watched. They did not speak. They did not move. Their silence was not neutral. It became the lubricant that allowed the system to function without friction. The officers hauled Laverne upright. Her feet shuffled, searching for balance, denied the support of her cane, denied the dignity of steady ground. Please, she said. One word. Not pleading, simply stating the truth that deserved to be heard. That wasn't. Her wrist was cuffed, the metal clicked once. Final. In the lobby, a young woman near the exit put her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with a helplessness that verged on panic. A few seconds later, she turned and fled through the front doors. Her footsteps, staccato and frantic, breaking through the room's suffocating stillness. The lobby fell back into silence, a silence that condemned as effectively as any voice. Outside, the woman stumbled onto the sidewalk, breath coming in sharp gasps. She wasn't crying. but her face carried the unmistakable expression of someone who had witnessed something they could not unsee. Her distress cut through the winter air. Crunch noticed. He looked up from his bike, eyes narrowing behind his sunglasses. Rocco and Sparrow paused, following his gaze. "What happened?" Rocco asked. Crunch didn't answer. He stepped forward, boots striking the pavement with deliberate, grounded weight. The kind of weight that filled a space without aggression, only certainty. The woman hurried past them, shaking her head. "They're arresting that old lady," she whispered, not stopping long enough to explain. "For no reason." The words landed. Crunch's boots stopped at the curb. He looked toward the bank entrance. Inside, Laverne's cane still lay on the lobby floor, as the officers guided her to roughly. Toward the door, the security feed continued blinking. The patrons remained silent. The system watched without feeling. And Crunch, standing at the curb with the cold wind tugging at his vest, became the first person outside the glass to truly see what was happening. The breaking point had already been crossed. Only the consequences remained. The bank doors shuddered open on their hydraulic hinges, releasing a slow exhale of conditioned air into the winter morning. The sound was soft, almost delicate, a controlled hiss, marking the threshold between two worlds. Inside, a system continued its work, fluorescent lights buzzing, cameras blinking, authority unfolding in predictable lines. Outside, something older and far less predictable shifted awake. Crunch watched through the glass dot in his mirrored sunglasses. The entire scene played out in miniature. Laverne's bent figure, the officers gripping her arms, the fallen cane lying like a discarded truth on the lobby floor. Each reflection shimmered across the curved lenses, distorted but unmistakable. "Yeah," he murmured, "something's wrong." Sparrow followed his gaze, jaw tightening. Rocco started forward, but Crunch raised a hand, a small, precise gesture that held more command than any barked order. Rocco halted. "No charging," and Sparrow said quietly. "Not yet." Crunch nodded once. Their power never came from impulsiveness. It came from the weight of deliberate action, action that, when it arrived, was unmistakable. For now, they watched, measured still, assessing the fault lines forming behind those glass walls. Inside, Laverne's silence deepened into something unmistakable. Not fear, not shock, something more grounded, more deliberate. Her back straightened, not by much, but enough. Enough that the cuffs on her wrists seemed like an insult rather than a constraint. Enough that the officer's hold on her arms felt clumsy in comparison to her composed stillness. They guided her toward the lobby, one step at a time. She kept her chin level, her eyes forward. The short officer murmured, "Watch your step," but he spoke the words like a warning, not an assurance. The taller one's grip tightened with each small resistance she did not offer. Behind them, the manager lingered in the doorway of the verification room, hands knotted behind his back. His neutral expression had begun to crack. Guilt seeped through the edges, but he held the same posture, the same quiet, cowardly professionalism. The untouched coffee cooled on the table behind him, its surface dark and still. The security feed continued blinking red. Outside, Crunch pushed off from the curb. He took 2 steps toward the bank entrance, boots landing with steady, intentional weight. Sparrow fell into stride beside him. Rocco stayed near the bikes, arms folded, eyes sweeping the parking lot as though expecting trouble to materialize from the asphalt itself. Crunch and Sparrow walked without hurry, without aggression, without any of the theatrics people often expected from men wearing the angels. Emblem. Their silence was its own kind of authority. As they approached the doors, the hydraulic mechanism released another soft hiss, a breath drawn before speaking. The officers inside didn't look up immediately. They were too focused on Laverne's body, too absorbed in the choreography of arrest, the grip, the pressure, the guiding tug. All technique, no humanity. It took a full 3 seconds before the taller officer noticed the figures standing just beyond the glass. He froze for half a heartbeat. Sparrow lifted his chin slightly, not in challenge but acknowledgement. His sunglasses reflected the officer's face back at him, small, pale, warped by curved glass. Crunch didn't speak. Neither did Sparrow. Their silence carried weight. Judgment withheld. But present, observation sharpened. Inside, the bank patrons stiffened. Some turned away, pretending not to see. Others watched openly now, their earlier passivity cracking under the pressure of escalation. The glass walls seemed to magnify everything. The tension, the silence, the slow lifting of Laverne's chin. The transparency offered no protection, only exposure. The officers resumed their movement, though something in their posture shifted. Not a softening, but a defensiveness. Authority accustomed to being unquestioned now felt eyes on it that did not fear badges. The shorter officer muttered, "Keep moving, ma'am." Laverne moved. One step, then another. Slow, deliberate, unmistakably her own. The cuffs clicked against each other behind her back with each shift of her arms. The fluorescent lights gave her silver hair a cold sheen. Her shoulders remained straight, resilient. Dignity. Even the patrons could see it now. Crunch watched her walk. In the mirrored lenses of his sunglasses, she appeared small, but not diminished. She's not fighting them, Sparrow said, voice low. They think she is. Crunch replied, another hiss from the doors. Another exhale of conditioned air. They stepped inside. The officers stiffened as the angels entered the lobby. Though neither Crunch nor Sparrow made any threatening move, they simply stood near the rope line, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid crossing any line that could be construed as interference. Their boots remained planted at the edge of the tile, solid, unmoving, marking a boundary between witness and intervention. The taller officer cleared his throat, a reflexive attempt to reclaim authority. This is a police matter. Crunch tilted his head slightly. Looks like it. The officer hesitated. He had expected resistance, or aggression, or something volatile. He hadn't prepared for quiet scrutiny. We need you to step back, the officer said. We're back, Sparrow replied. His voice was calm, almost gentle. We're just watching, and they were. Watching with the calm patience of men who had seen violence, understood it, and knew how to respond if needed, but who also knew that restraint could be its own show of power. Their restraint made the officers nervous. Laverne stood between them all, posture still dignified despite the sharp metal around her wrists. Her breath remained slow. You okay, ma'am? Sparrow asked. He didn't move toward her. He didn't raise his voice. He simply spoke the words into the air, acknowledging her humanity without disturbing the fragile tension around them. Laverne turned her head slightly. Not much, just enough. Yes, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. I am. The officers exchanged another glance. Confusion, irritation, fear. Crunch didn't move. He didn't need to. He had seen enough. The lobby became a stage, suspended between action and consequence. Two officers gripping authority tighter than necessary, a dignified woman refusing to bend beneath humiliation, and two silent men whose calm presence complicated the entire choreography of power. Behind the counter, the teller swallowed hard. In the manager's office, the untouched coffee cooled further. On the wall, the security feed blinked its red, indifferent eye. And at the center of it all, Laverne lifted her chin, another fraction of an inch. A small gesture, a quiet rebuke, a refusal to break. The angels did not intervene, not yet, but they had stepped inside, and the system, for the first time that morning, felt watched. The lobby held its breath. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes after noise. It was the silence that precedes consequence. The fluorescent lights hummed without interruption, a thin mechanical drone filling the space, where human certainty had begun to falter. The distance between the officer's boots and the angels' boots became a boundary line neither side crossed. Not physical, not declared, but unmistakably present. A line of competing philosophies etched into tile, enforcement against lived experience, authority against autonomy, fear against calm. Laverne stood in the middle of it all, her wrists bound behind her. Her chin remained lifted, just slightly, but enough. Enough to show she had not surrendered what mattered. The officers shifted their weight, trying to stand taller. The angels did not move at all. Crunch's voice broke the silence first, not loud, not threatening, just steady. What exactly is she supposed to have done? The taller officer stiffened. Sir, this is a law enforcement situation. I'm asking you to step back. We're not in your way, Sparrow replied. His voice slid across the lobby like a calm blade. We're just asking. The officer's jaw flexed. He had dealt with belligerence before. He understood, loud, drunken, reckless, defiance, but quiet scrutiny that unsettled him. This woman is under arrest for presenting a fraudulent check, the short officer said, his tone clipped. Crunch's gaze slid to Laverne, then back to the officer. Is that confirmed? It's being investigated. So she's not actually charged, Sparrow said. She is being detained. The officer snapped. Detained? Where? Crunch asked. Here. Under these lights. In cuffs. The officer opened his mouth, then closed it. His authority was intact, but its confidence had cracked. Sparrow stepped slightly forward, a movement so small it was almost a shift of posture. Yet the officers flinched as though the floor had tilted. The gap between boots narrowed by inches, but the meaning of those inches was profound. Sparrow wasn't threatening. He was witnessing. And they weren't used to being witnessed by men who weren't afraid of them. The bank manager hurried forward, hands raised slightly, palms open, as if to prove he carried nothing dangerous, not even conviction. Gentlemen, he said, voice brittle, if we can all remain calm, we are calm. Crunch said. The manager faltered. His eyes darted to the officers for reassurance, then to Laverne, then away from her, always away. His job, his training, his fear all pointed him toward, deferring upward, not inward. He gave a strained smile that crumpled at the edges. This is just a misunderstanding. Sparrow turned his head slowly, fixing him with a gaze that pierced through the polite facade. Then why is she in cuffs? The manager's throat bobbed. It's publicity. Until things are verified, your policy, Crunch said, looks a lot like suspicion without proof. The officers bristled. This is police protocol. The taller one snapped. We don't answer to you, answer to the truth, Sparrow said, or you're supposed to. The taller officer took a step forward, boots landing just shy of Crunch's. The gap narrowed. Not a challenge, but an attempt to reclaim the stage. "You're interfering with an arrest," he asked. "No," Crunch said. "We're watching." The officer exhaled sharply. "We don't need an audience." Crunch tilted his head. "You have one, anyway." A flicker of something crossed the tall officer's eyes. Resentment, uncertainty, something hotter beneath the uniform's cold. He glanced at the security camera blinking overhead. Its red light flashed again, and again, an indifferent witness, but now, not the only one. Accountability had entered the lobby, not in the form of law or oversight, but in the unblinking calm of men who recognized injustice when they saw it. The short officer tightened his grip on Laverne's arm. She winced, barely, but Sparrow noticed. His posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Easy," he murmured. The words weren't for the officer. They were for her. It was the first time anyone in the room had spoken to Laverne as a person rather than a problem. She lifted her eyes. Toward Sparrow, only a fraction. A tiny acknowledgement, but within it lay gratitude, wariness, and something resilient. The refusal to shrink. Even while bound, the taller officer's voice came sharp. "Do not speak to the detainee." Sparrow didn't even look at him when he replied. Someone should. Laverne's breath hitched a small, tight inhale. Her silence carried more meaning than speech. Crunch stepped slightly closer to her, angling his body, not to threaten the officers, but to shield her from the stares of the patrons who were gathering near the rope line. He moved instinctively, as if drawn into a geometry of protection. The manager cleared his throat. "Let's all take a step back. Where was this concern a minute ago?" Crunch asked, still watching Laverne. When she said she did nothing wrong, the manager's face flushed, the bureaucratic mask finally cracking. "I was following procedure." The teller flagged the check. "Protocol dictates you're hiding behind rules." Sparrow said, "That's not the same as doing the right thing." The manager's lips trembled. His hands twisted together. He looked at the officers again for direction, for permission, for someone to tell him what posture to take. Laverne finally spoke. Her voice was so soft, the room leaned into it. "I gave them the check because I believed they would treat me fairly." The taller officer's jaw clenched. The short officer's grip loosened by a fraction. Maybe guilt, maybe shame, maybe fear of how the scene now appeared under unfamiliar eyes. Crunch lowered his sunglasses slightly, just enough for Laverne to see his eyes. "You're not alone," he said. The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a verdict. Not against her, against the way she had been treated. In the security feed's blinking red light, the room seemed to tilt, revealing its imbalance. Power had been a monologue. Now it was a dialogue, and the officers had to confront something they rarely faced, a counterweight that did not fear them, a witness that would not look away, a woman who, even with wrists bound, refused to bend her dignity. The lobby remained still. Boots on tile, cuffs on skin, sunglasses reflecting truth. Authority cornered by observation. Something fundamental had shifted. Collision didn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrived in quiet questions that left no comfortable place to stand. The reprimand came quietly, not in the sharp sting of discipline the officers expected, nor the accountability the moment demanded, but in a hushed administrative corner of the lobby where Marion Holt spoke in controlled, clipped sentences meant to correct without truly confronting. Her voice carried the tone of procedural disappointment, not moral outrage. "You acted prematurely," she said. The tall officer's jaw twitched. "We followed the call. You escalated beyond necessity." The short officer looked away, heat rising in his neck. "We acted within protocol." Marion paused. "Protocol is not a shield for judgment errors." Not a shield, but still, the consequences were thin. No suspension, no public correction, just a note, a record, a conversation that would soften with time and dissolve into the bureaucratic sediment of institutional memory. Behind them, the bank manager shuffled forward toward Laverne as she moved slowly toward the exit. Cane tapping lightly, a patient, steady metronome in a room that had lost its rhythm. "Mrs. Carter," he began, rubbing his hands together as though trying to warm them on his own discomfort. "I want to say that we regret how this unfolded." Laverne stopped. She did not turn to face him fully, only enough for him to see her profile. The dignified line of her jaw, the steadiness in her posture. "What you regret," she said softly, "is that it became visible?" The words did not rise in anger. They simply landed, and they stayed. The manager's smile faltered. His apology evaporated. He nodded, eyes drifting downward, away from her, away from truth. She resumed walking, each step deliberate, unhurried. The automatic doors sensed her approach and parted. A smooth mechanical motion that felt almost ceremonial. As she crossed the threshold, the cold institutional air gave way to the muted warmth of an overcast day. The doors slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, not a sound of dismissal, but a boundary closing, sealing the institution behind glass and metal. Crunch and Sparrow followed her out, neither flanking nor leading, just walking beside her with a silent assurance that no further harm would touch her before she left this space. Their presence did not overshadow her. It aligned with her. They did not speak, because nothing needed to be spoken. In the parking lot, her car waited in a quiet corner, the paint slightly faded, the windshield reflecting the muted sky. She reached for the door with her free hand. Sparrow stopped a few steps back, giving her space but staying until the final moment. Crunch removed his sunglasses. His gaze held neither pity nor condescension, only respect. "You good to drive?" he asked, voice low enough not to carry. Laverne nodded once. "I'm fine." Not a declaration of strength, a simple truth. Sparrow inclined his head, a gesture that meant, "We see you. All of you." She opened her door, settling into the seat with care. Her cane lay across her lap like a reclaimed piece of her autonomy. She closed the door gently, the shutting of it a soft punctuation mark to the ordeal. The angel stepped back as she started the engine. Her car rolled forward slowly, pulling away from the bank. The building's mirrored windows, reflecting a distorted version of the world inside. Only once she had exited the lot. Did Crunch move? He slid his sunglasses back on, walked to his motorcycle, and swung a leg over. Sparrow and the third angel mirrored him. Engines ignited in unison, a synchronized rumble that cut through the stagnant air of the parking lot. The sound was not violent or boastful. It was steady, resolute, power leaving the scene. A reminder that protection, when righteous, did not linger to be thanked. They turned out of the lot and disappeared down the road with the controlled confidence of men accustomed to moving through a world that feared them, yet who had chosen restraint as their sharpest tool. Inside the bank, normalcy attempted to settle again. Patrons approached tellers. Pens clicked, chairs creaked, but the quiet was brittle, forced. A security camera mounted high in the corner blinked its unfeeling red light. Its footage captured Laverne's arrest, the confrontation, the unraveling, but without context, without morality, without truth. Only angles in motion, only optics. Later, the event would be logged in internal bank memos as an incident involving a misidentified check. The phrasing would be polished until the human cost disappeared beneath corporate neutrality. A news ticker would scroll a short blurb. Elderly customer briefly detained due to banking error. No names, no dignity. New consequence. The system would frame the story as an aberration, not a symptom. But outside, Laverne's car moved steadily through the city streets, her hands firm on the wheel. The angel's engines faded into distance. The doors of the bank remained closed behind her. And somewhere, in that space between what happened and what would be recorded, the truth lingered. Unpolished UNFORGOTTEN. It lived in the way the officers looked at the floor, in the way the manager's apology dissolved, in the way Laverne lifted her chin, even in cuffs, in the way witnesses shifted uncomfortably as the system exposed itself, and in the quiet, moral weight of three men who stood still when it mattered. The camera kept blinking its red light, but it never really saw. The arrival happened without drama, just the hush of an automatic door opening and closing, a faint shift in the room's posture, the quiet repositioning of authority. A woman in a slate gray suit crossed the lobby with measured steps. Every motion was efficient. No wasted gestures, no visible emotion. A badge clipped to her belt caught the fluorescent light, a cold flash against a colder room. Regional Compliance Officer, Marion Holt. Her presence was not loud, but it was absolute. The officers straightened as she approached. The bank manager nearly tripped over himself to greet her, his voice cracking beneath the weight of belated urgency. "Ms. Holt, thank you for coming so quickly. We have a situation." "There's been, I'm aware," she said. Just that, no warmth, no irritation. A tone shaped by years of neutralizing crises she hadn't created. She looked at the officers, then at Laverne, still cuffed, still standing with that lifted chin that refused erasure. Marion's eyes narrowed, not at Laverne, but at the tableau. "This is the customer?" she asked. Both officers nodded. "Charges?" she asked. The taller one replied, presenting a fraudulent check. Teller flagged it. "We were called." She became uncooperative. Marion blinked once. Slowly. "Uncooperative how?" The short officer gestured vaguely. She was difficult, wouldn't answer directly. Laverne remained silent. Her dignity filled the space the officers failed to occupy. Marion held up a folder, thin, precise, authoritative in its simplicity. "This the check." The manager handed it over with trembling fingers. She examined it under the fluorescent light, her expression unreadable. She flipped a page, then another. Each turn of paper sliced through the officer's confidence like a measured blade. "This check is valid," she said, quietly, clinically. A sentence with consequences. The tall officer stiffened. "Ma'am," the teller flagged, and the teller was wrong. Marion closed the folder. "The account holder confirmed the issuance 20 minutes ago. The internal alert was a misread of the routing number. A system error." The short officer swallowed. "We acted based on the call from the bank." Marion did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You acted beyond what the situation required." The hum of the lights grew sharper, as if the building itself was listening. The officers shifted their feet. The gap between their boots and the angels remained, but its meaning had changed. Earlier, it was a line of potential clash. Now it felt like a boundary between worlds, one losing its footing, one holding the ground steady. Crunch didn't speak. Neither did Sparrow. Their silence had become a kind of pressure, heavier than words. Marion turned to the short officer. "Remove the cuffs." He hesitated, pride twitching beneath his uniform. A man caught between ego and evidence, protocol and error. The room watched him realize that there was no interpretation left to cling to. Finally, he reached for his belt. The keys jangled, metallic, small, a fragile symbol of power suddenly laid bare. The lock clicked. A simple sound, yet the weight of it resonated through the lobby. Laverne's wrists came free. She didn't rub them. She didn't look at the officers. She simply lowered her hands with a slowness that felt like ceremony, reclaiming her own body, her own space, on her own terms. Marion handed her the cane the officers had left against a desk. The wood was warm from the lights, but its absence had left a colder mark. "Mrs. Carter," Marion said, "I apologize for what occurred here." The officers stiffened. They had offered no apology. That gap, too, became part of the room's architecture. Laverne took the cane, her fingers wrapped around it with quiet precision. The return of the object felt less like a courtesy and more like a restoration of something that should never have been taken, a piece of her autonomy. She straightened. The posture was subtle, but it radiated across the tiled floor. Marion faced the officers again. "Do you have anything you'd like to say to the customer?" Silence. Not the earlier silence of tension, but the silence of men cornered by their own decisions. Pride welded their tongues. Neither moved. Crunch's voice broke the quiet, low, steady, and final. "That says enough." The officers tensed, but they had no ground left to stand on. Marion turned away from them, looking instead at the bank manager. "We'll discuss procedural failures in your office." He swallowed hard. "Yes, of course." She collected her documents, tools of a system that tried to correct itself only after harm was done. Papers that came too late. Procedures that shielded institutions more than people. Laverne shifted her cane, a soft tap against the floor. Claiming her place again, Crunch stepped back. Not retreat, respect. Sparrow gave Laverne a single nod, slow and deliberate, acknowledging her endurance. The patrons watched, some ashamed, some curious, some relieved. The storm had passed without violence. None of them spoke. The security camera blinked red. Its indifferent lens captured everything after the damage. As always, institutional correction had arrived. But correction was not remedy. Procedure was not justice. The cuffs lay on the desk, open, empty, an artifact of a system that tightened first and questioned later. Laverne walked toward the exit, cane tapping a steady rhythm, a heartbeat of resilience echoing against polished tile. No one blocked her path, not anymore. But the path itself, the one that had led here, remained unchanged. The institution had unraveled just enough to expose its own threads woven tight around suspicion, loosened only under external pressure. Marion Holt watched her leave. Crunch and Sparrow followed with slow, measured steps, shadows stretching long behind them. The lobby settled into its silence again. But this silence was different. It was no longer the silence of a machine running smoothly. It was the silence of a system caught in the act.